Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, so today we're taking a look back, way back to the early Soviet Union, the 1920s.
Right, a period often framed, around Reconstruction after the Civil War.
Exactly. But what our sources show is, well, something darker happening beneath the surface. A really profound, almost terrifying shift in how justice itself was being used.
Or misused, perhaps.
Yeah. So our mission today is to unpack how the Soviet legal system, which maybe looked pragmatic at first glance, very quickly became this sharp tool for political control. We got some surprising facts, forgotten cases to dig into.
And what's really striking, especially around 1922, is this explosion of public trials, a huge jump after the war ended.
Why, though? What was driving that?
Well, it hints at the law itself being twisted, reshaped to serve raw power, like, as one source puts it, a dragon becoming very, very energetic. We need to figure out why that happened.
And how easily law can just be redefined, not for justice, but for an agenda.
Precisely. It's about how power defines what's legal.
Okay, so let's dive into that first big shift. Blame. Our sources point to a case in May 1921, the Glove Tube Affair. This involved engineers, the specialists, from the Main Fuels Committee.
And you have to picture the scene. 1921, brutal winter, famine gripping the country, cold, strikes, chaos.
So naturally someone had to be blamed, but interestingly, it wasn't the top leadership, not even local bosses.
No, it landed squarely on the engineers.
They were accused of what? Inflated calculations, not pushing back against urgent orders, giving out fuel outside the plant, things like that.
But the initial sentences, surprisingly light, actually.
Right. The proletarian court, as it was called then, wasn't quite merciless yet. Why was that?
They were mostly seen as just inept, not actively malicious, maybe struggling with the new system or, maybe a bit self-serving bribe takers even, but not wreckers.
So a distinction between inner hostility and just being bad at the job under new management.
Exactly. Even Krylenko, who becomes a major figure later, apparently said back in 1920 there was no real evidence of sabotage. This sets up a really stark contrast with what comes next.
Because that leniency didn't last long at all. There's this seemingly minor case that pops up in February 1922. Engineer Oldenburger's suicide. Our sources say this one really foreshadowed the horror to come.
Tell us about him.
Oldenburger, chief engineer, Moscow Water Supply. For 30 years, deeply dedicated, described as apolitical. All he cared about was water flow, apparently even during revolutions. No wife, no kids. The water system was his life.
A true specialist.
Absolutely. But suddenly he's labeled an enemy. Why? Because he apparently once muttered something like, the Soviet regime won't last 2 weeks.
And that ties right into Lenin's directive, doesn't it? To keep watch over the bourgeois specialists. They literally needed a watchdog.
And they got him. 2 full-time agents from the Workers and Peasant Inspection, the RKI, assigned directly to Oldenburger.
RKI, that's the government oversight body, right? This is supposed to root out inefficiency, corruption.
Supposedly. But one of these agents, Solzhenitsyn, he was a known swindler. He'd actually been fired from the water system before for improper conduct. He joined RKI for better pay, and, well, our sources suggest he was out for hearty vengeance against Oldenburger.
So a personal vendetta wrapped in state authority?
Exactly. Then the party steps in directly. Communists take top jobs, shuffle engineers around without Oldenburger even knowing. They called it breaking up the nest of businessmen.
And the result?
Predictably, the water system started to fall apart.
Okay.
Oldenburger, apparently quite out of character, complained to Krylenko, calling the new chief's actions stupid stubbornness.
And that was twisted.
Twisted into proof. Proof he was consciously betraying the interests of the workers, a direct and open enemy. Even though inspection commissions found the system basically okay, the RKI guys wouldn't accept it. They insisted Oldenburger wanted to ruin it. For politics.
Wow. Despite the evidence.
And get this. The actual workers at the pumping station, the ones the party dismissed as having petty bourgeois psychology, they defended Oldenburger, even nominated him for the Moscow Soviet.
That must have infuriated the party official.
Oh, it did. The party secretary, Sadelnikov, publicly denounced Oldenburger as the soul of sabotage, a political enemy, and he called the workers defending him Black Hundred reactionary pogrom makers.
That's heavy language.
Yeah.
Accusing them of being violent anti-Semitic reactionaries.
A clear attempt to completely discredit them. The pressure on Oldenburger just ramped up, kicked off the collegium, constant investigations, humiliating tasks, and extraordinary troika put in charge.
A troika, that 3-person panel with sweeping powers, never a good sign.
Never. Then Sadelnikov writes this newspaper article just fabricating alarming rumors, claiming the water system was pumping water underground, washing away Moscow's foundations.
That's absurd.
He later admitted he just wanted to stir up a fuss to get these spy accusations taken seriously. Then he denounced Oldenburger to the Chika, or the GPU as it was becoming known.
The secret police.
Right. And Oldenburger, he couldn't take it. His order for vital new boilers was refused. He committed suicide. The sources say he just wasn't built for that kind of sustained psychological assault.
A tragic end driven by political maneuvering.
And then there's a trial.
Yeah.
But not for Oldenburger. For Sadelnikov, the accuser.
Really?
What happened? Krylenko prosecuted him, accused him of false denunciations, personal grudge, abuse of power, disorganizing work, and damaging the state because, there are a few such specialists.
And the sentence?
Supposedly 1 year in jail, but the sources we have actually express some doubt if that sentence was ever really served.
But the case itself?
Exactly. This forgotten, insignificant case, as the source calls it, was like an early blueprint, a test run for the big show trials later, Shaky Prompartia.
It shows that critical shift. From blaming mere ineptness, which is maybe understandable after a war, to deliberately fabricating conscious sabotage.
A necessary step if you want to justify political purges, redefining law step by step.
Oh.
Okay, so let's shift focus now. Another major target, the church. The context here is absolutely brutal. End of the Civil War, the Volga famine hits.
And the descriptions in our sources are harrowing. Cannibalism, parents eating children, things barely whispered about in official histories.
Unimaginable. But what were the underlying causes? Beyond just the war disruption.
Well, agricultural output had just cratered. Peasants had zero trust in the authorities. And crucially, huge amounts of food had been shipped out month after month to Imperial Germany under the Brest-Litovsk Treaty.
Shipped from where?
From the very provinces that were now starving.
So with that backdrop of utter desperation, a brilliant idea was born, as one source puts it, rather cynically.
Exploit the famine.
Exploit the famine to destroy the church. It was seen as a way to pocket 3 billiard balls in one shot.
How so?
Think about it. If the church refuses to help, you blame the famine on them. Destroy their reputation, maybe their structure. If they agree to help, well, then the state can just clean out the churches, seize all the valuables.
And either way, the state gets its hands on precious metals, boosts foreign currency reserves.
Exactly. It's ingenious in its cruelty.
So how did the church initially respond?
Patriarch Tikhon, the head of the Orthodox Church, he tried. Formed committees, raised funds, even appealed internationally to the Pope, the Archbishop of Canterbury.
And the state's reaction?
Shut it down. Banned the committees, confiscated the money, told the Patriarch off for talking to foreigners. Only Soviet authorities could do that, apparently. The trap was being set.
How?
The State Commission for Famine Relief, POMEL, they proposed churches voluntarily donate non-essential valuables. Things not used in services.
Okay, seems reasonable on the surface.
And the Patriarch agreed. He permitted these gifts in February 1922. But then, boom, stroke of lightning, decree on February 26th.
What did it say?
All valuables, everything, even sacred items used in worship, all subject to requisition, forced seizure.
That's a complete reversal. How did the Patriarch react?
With what our sources call his fateful pastoral letter on February 28th, he declared forced requisition of sacred items was sacrilege.
A very strong word. He must have known the risk.
He was in an impossible spot. Just elected, leading a church already under persecution, responsible for preserving it. His defiance, though maybe carefully worded, unleashed this surefire campaign of persecution in the newspapers, painting him as basically starving the Volga peasants himself.
Using the famine as a weapon against him?
Precisely. Now, there was this brief moment in Petrograd, a potential compromise. Metropolitan Veniamin, a very respected, gentle figure there, he agreed to voluntary giving.
Trying to keep the church out of politics.
Exactly. He insisted clergy and believers oversee the process. And initially, it worked. Peaceful, successful collections. Newspapers even praised it.
But that wasn't the real goal, was it?
Apparently not. That compromise was not what the starving people of the Volga needed, quote-unquote. The Petrograd Pomel Committee, deemed too spineless, was just replaced.
And the message changed.
Drastically, it became, we don't need your donations. Everything belongs to the government, and the government will take what it wants. End of story.
So confrontation was inevitable.
Which leads us to the Moscow church trial, April, May 1922. Polytechnic Museum. 17 defendants. The main charge, spreading the Patriarch's letter about sacrilege.
And the outcome.
Brutal. Archpriest Zazursky defended the principle of sacrilege. Even though he'd already handed over all his church's valuables, he was shot.
Shot, even after complying.
Could prove the point, didn't it? This wasn't about feeding the starving. It was about using the situation to break the back of the church.
A political objective disguised as humanitarianism.
Patriarch Tikhon himself was called as a witness. Apparently, half the audience, carefully screened as it was, still rose for his blessing.
A moment of defiance.
He took full responsibility. And when they asked him if state laws were obligatory, he gave that famous answer. Yes, I recognize them to the extent that they do not contradict the rules of piety.
A qualified yes. Very careful.
The prosecution tactics were, well, insidious. Picking apart the word sacrilege to imply the Soviets were being called thieves, demanding names of people who saw icons trampled, otherwise it's a lie. All about creating a mood.
Preparing public opinion for the verdict?
Which was harsh. 11 sentenced to death, 5 actually executed. Krylenko wasn't kidding when he said, "We didn't come here just to crack jokes."
And Tikhon.
Arrested. Removed from office just a week later.
And this wasn't just Moscow.
No. Then came Petrograd, July 1922. Metropolitan Veniamin, the one who tried to compromise, now on trial with dozens of others, charged with resisting requisition.
The setup sounds similar.
Even more stark, maybe. The tribunal president, a 25-year-old ex-baker. The chief accuser, Krestikov, a friend of Lenin's, just declared the entire Orthodox Church a subversive organization that ought to be put in prison.
Wow, open hostility.
Crowds knelt for Veniamin outside. Even Red Army soldiers reportedly rose when he entered the court. People supporting him were arrested on the spot.
And the defense?
Defense lawyers threatened. A witness testifying for Veniamin. Imprisoned, right there. Only prosecution witnesses allowed. It was a sham.
But did anyone speak out?
One defense attorney, S.U. Gurevich, showed incredible bravery, stood up and said, "There are no proofs of guilt, there are no facts, there is not even an indictment."
Powerful words.
And chillingly prophetic. He predicted, history will forget and say nothing, and warned that the church will be nourished by the blood of martyrs.
He saw where this was leading.
The verdict. 10 condemned to death in Petrograd. 4, including Metropolitan Veniamin, were shot in mid-August.
And you said this was widespread.
Our sources confirm it.
Yeah.
22 similar provincial church trials happening around the same time. This wasn't random. It was a systematic campaign.
A nationwide assault on the church using the famine and the courts as weapons.
Exactly. But such a systematic attack, well, it needed a stronger legal foundation.
So the existing laws weren't quite sufficient.
Apparently not. There was this sudden urgency to create a new criminal code, specifically timed for another major trial coming up, the Socialist Revolutionary, or SR, trial.
And Lenin was involved?
Directly, personally. Our sources show he reviewed the draft code in May 1922, found the first 6 articles on the death penalty unsatisfactory.
It's unsatisfactory how? Not harsh enough.
Precisely. So on May 15th, he personally added 6 more articles expanding its use.
Like what? What kind of things became capital offenses?
Things like propaganda and agitation, even passive resistance, mass rejection of tax payments. Under the Tsar, maybe a few months in jail. Now, execution, also unauthorized return from abroad.
Death for coming home without permission.
Yes. And what's really telling is Lenin's thinking ahead. He even made exile abroad equivalent to execution, anticipating perhaps a time when people might want to return to the Soviet Union.
That's quite some foresight. Chilling foresight.
And he wasn't shy about the purpose. His letter to Kursky, the Commissar of Justice, on May 17th is explicit. He demanded the code openly, set forth a statute which is both principled and politically truthful, not just legally technical.
Politically truthful, meaning?
Meaning it had to justify terror. He wrote, it needed to supply the motivation for the essence and the justification of terror, its necessity, its limits. The court must not exclude terror, he insisted. It had to be defined as broadly as possible.
Based on what?
Based on revolutionary righteousness and a revolutionary conscience, not objective law.
So, law explicitly as a political tool, justified by revolutionary feeling.
Exactly. This laid the rails for the infamous Article 58 later on, the one that could be stretched to cover almost anything, propaganda, agitation, helping someone who might help someone else considered counter-revolutionary. As the source says, everything was inserted as required.
Infinitely flexible. Infinitely dangerous.
The code was rushed through, adopted soon after May 20th, effective June 1st, 1922. Just in time.
Just in time for the SR trial.
Right. And when you think about the implications, this redefinition of justice, this open embrace of terror in the legal code itself.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What were people genuinely surprised about in 1937 during the Great Purge? Hadn't the foundations been laid right here?
First, the Czech killings outside the law. Now these this new code codifying lawlessness.
Krylenko himself said it, didn't he? They were judging not the past but the future. He knew they were setting precedents.
And that major trial, the one this code was seemingly tailored for, was the Socialist Revolutionary Trial, June 8th to August 7th, 1922. The Supreme Tribunal. This was the big one.
The real showpiece. And the core principle driving it, according to our sources, wasn't about guilt or innocence in any traditional sense.
No. What was it then?
Expediency. Pure political expediency.
Right.
The SRs, unlike some other groups like the Mensheviks, were still seen as a potential threat. It was simply expedient to finish them off.
So justice is defined by who wins the power struggle.
Essentially, yes. The source puts it bluntly. Whoever succeeds in making a more successful and more enduring revolution is from that moment on graced with the bright robes of justice. Might makes right, legally codified.
Wow. Okay, so what were the actual charges against these former revolutionaries?
Oh, it was a laundry list. Starting the Civil War for resisting the Bolshevik coup. Deepening the Civil War for supporting the Constituent Assembly after the Bolsheviks shut it down.
So things that happened years before.
Yes. Then, high treason for not recognizing the Brest-Litovsk Treaty with Germany. Destroying public wealth for supposedly planning to blow up tracks to stop gold shipments. Gold that was actually going to Germany.
The irony.
Then extreme treason for taking money from the Entente powers not to give that gold to the Kaiser. And finally, just the catch-all. Being spies, collaborators with reactionaries, yesterday's revolutionaries, today's spies.
A complete inversion. And how did the prosecution handle this? Krylenko again.
Yes, Krylenko. And his approach was apparently quite artistic. He adopted this tone of heartfelt sympathy, almost friendly criticism.
Friendly criticism.
Right.
While sending them to potentially face execution.
Right. Asking things like, after all, you and we are revolutionaries. How could you have fallen so low as to join with the cadets, the Liberal Party? Trying to paint them as traitors to the revolutionary cause itself.
Psychological games.
Arguing that taking money from the bourgeois for their cause inevitably corrupted them, made them dependent on the bourgeoisie.
Okay, but what about the amnesty? Didn't you mention an amnesty in 1919 for past actions during the Civil War?
Ah, yes. That was a big hurdle for Krylenko. How do you try them for things they were supposedly amnestied for?
So, his solution.
Focus on a new charge. Terrorism. That wasn't covered by the amnesty.
But did they have evidence of recent terrorism?
Well, this is where it gets really manipulative. An SR leader merely having a plan to blow up a train, that makes the whole Central Committee guilty. A supposed terrorist spotted near Trotsky's train, Central Committee's guilty.
Guilt by association. Massively amplified.
Even an SR warning Fanya Kaplan not to shoot Lenin that was twisted into proof of guilt. Why? Because they didn't categorically forbid her or, crucially, denounce her to the Cheka.
Failure to report is now evidence of complicity in the act itself.
Exactly. And the witnesses they used, very questionable. Two figures, Konop and Semyonov, testified very eagerly, almost too eagerly, against the SRs.
And what happened to them?
Mysteriously released after testifying, which obviously raises huge questions about coercion or deals being made.
So, tainted testimony. How did Krylenko justify using it?
With some incredibly cynical logic, basically arguing that if they were going to make things up, they'd have made up more, so the partial story must be true. Or arguing it was unlikely someone would endanger these witnesses without cause. It's pretzel logic.
It completely abandons any pretense of objective proof.
And then comes the masterstroke, the canonical weapon, as the source calls it. A brand new legal discovery.
Which was?
Failure to denounce. The idea that the SR party was guilty for not having squealed on itself.
Guilty for not self-reporting potential future crimes or internal discussions.
Precisely. And this principle, our source says, became a paved highway for sending generations into Siberia. It created an obligation to be an informant, even against your own group.
That's terrifyingly broad?
And it cemented these new legal ideas in practice. No distinction between intent and action. Thinking about overthrowing the government, whispering it to your wife, actually planting a bomb legally, it became all the same.
Same crime, same punishment.
Identical punishment, usually execution. As the source notes, the entire panorama of 1937, 1945, and 1949 becomes ever clearer and more visible in the sketches of 1922. The blueprint was being drawn.
Did any of the defendants resist this? Pushback?
Some did, remarkably. One Lieberman reportedly said, "I admit I was guilty of failing to work hard enough at overthrowing the Bolshevik government in 1918. Another, Berg, declared himself guilty for having been unable to fight with all my strength, defiant to the end."
Wow. Using their own trial to make a final center.
The tribunal, very aware it was watched by the whole world, handed down 14 death sentences. Not all were carried out immediately. Others got long prison terms.
But there was a twist with the death sentences, wasn't there?
Yes. A really cruel one. They were left hanging. The sentences remained in effect but wouldn't be carried out immediately. Their fate depended on the future behavior of SRs still free, even those abroad.
Eternal hostages.
Exactly. Their lives held ransom against the actions of others.
And how did the public react? Was there any dissent?
The public messaging was overwhelming. Pravda devoted 60 issues to the trial. They were read aloud everywhere, and the message was unanimous. Yes, 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 condemn them. As the source puts it, no one mumbled no. Public acclamation, total conformity. The show trial perfected. Law as pure political theater ending with hostages.
This transformation, this mastery of control using the legal system, it didn't stop there. It evolved, became even more sophisticated, extending beyond just the courtroom.
Right. There are examples of outright deception, extrajudicial actions becoming more refined.
Absolutely. And a chilling example is the Savinkov affair. Boris Savinkov, he's a very famous socialist revolutionary, a writer, a fighter. He crossed back into the Soviet Union in August 1924.
And was promptly arrested.
Immediately. But it wasn't random. The GPU, the secret police, had lured him back.
How?
Using his own agents, feeding him disinformation, they convinced him this large underground anti-Bolshevik organization existed inside Russia, just waiting for a leader like him. It was an elaborate setup.
A trap. And they were careful, weren't they? Our sources mentioned they avoided torture.
Yes, deliberately. They wanted his eventual confessions, his trial testimony, to appear completely authentic for the public narrative. No signs of coercion.
So the trial itself
Happened incredibly fast. August 26, 1924. Indictment ready in 3 days. No prosecutor, no defense lawyer needed. And Savinkov himself was apparently quite laconic, almost indifferent.
treating it as his last encounter with Russia.
That's how the source describes it. A chance to explain himself and to repent. The whole tone was strangely conciliatory, playing on this idea of, after all, we are all Russians together.
A very deceptive performance by the state.
And the sentence reflected that performance.
Right.
It was presented as stunningly merciful. Death penalty, not required. Commuted to 10 years.
Which must have confused a lot of people. This famous anti-Bolshevik gets 10 years.
Exactly. It was spun as proof of the Soviet government's strength and confidence. But then, less than a year later, May 1925.
The official story is suicide.
Right. Savinkov jumped from an unbarred window at the Lubyanka, the GPU headquarters. They even produced a suicide letter, apparently very authentically phrased. It even convinced his own son for a long time.
But that wasn't the truth. This is where the crude third riddle, as the source puts it, unravels.
What really happened?
Years later, confessions emerged. A former Chekist, Arthur Prill, admitted in 1937 that he was one of 4 agents who physically threw Savinkov out of that window. It was murder disguised as suicide.
Thrown out the window, just like that.
And it gets even more chilling. Another figure, Blumkin himself, an assassin who'd killed the German ambassador and was protected by Dzerzhinsky, the head of the Cheka GPU.
What about him?
Blumkin confessed in the late 1920s that he was the one who forged Savinkov's so-called suicide note on GPU orders. He'd spent time in Savinkov's cell studying his writing style, keeping him amused while planning his demise.
So the letter itself was a GPU fabrication. The whole thing was staged.
Start to finish, a complete deception.
And the final irony for Blumkin. The forger, the assassin.
He himself was eventually consumed by the very machine he served. He visited Trotsky after Trotsky was exiled. Someone snitched Radek, another prominent figure, and Blumkin was arrested and executed, devoured by the monster he helped create.
Wow. It's a tangled web of betrayal and violence. Okay, so we've traced this journey. Early 1920s Soviet Union, from blaming inept engineer,
Fabricating widespread sabotage plots.
using a devastating famine to dismantle the church,
Crafting a new criminal code to explicitly justify terror.
perfecting the political show trial with the SRs.
And finally, mastering intricate deception and assassination, like with Savinkov.
It's a chilling progression.
Yeah.
But looking back at all this, what does it really mean? For you, listening now.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's a powerful, frankly stark reminder of what can happen when a state gains the power to completely redefine justice, when it controls the narrative utterly.
How do you even begin to discern truth in that kind of environment? It feels relevant even today, with information overload, carefully constructed narratives.
That's the question, isn't it? How do you apply this historical knowledge? How do you stay vigilant against the manipulation of language, the twisting of legal principles for political ends?
It really raises that fundamental issue.
Hmm.
When political expediency just completely replaces objective justice, what's the ultimate cost? To individuals, to society.
And how alert do we have to be constantly to prevent that kind of transformation, that slide into lawlessness disguised as law, from ever taking root again? Something to really think about.